Well, hey there, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Before we get started tonight, if you missed it, I wanted to make sure that you knew that we are, in fact, meeting in person again. We started last Wednesday, and so far, so good. We had a great time seeing everyone and being together in a responsible way. And so if you feel comfortable doing so, we'd love for you to join us this Wednesday starting at 6:45 p.m. Now, last week, we kicked off a brand new series called What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do, or Witted, Wide, Quitted.
So, when you don't know how to do something, how to fix something, or how something works, what do? Ask a teacher? Ask your parents? Ask your friends? Ask someone you really know and trust? No! You go to the internet and ask some randos. But I'm not talking about creeps here, I hope. No, I mean the people of the internet! You know, those people who make how-to videos. Because chances are, if you're trying to figure out something, someone on the internet has already figured it out for you. Things like, how do I unsend a text? No. How do I do a winged eyeliner? How do I get rid of the zit by Friday night? How do I get out of gym class? How do I screen cap Snapchat without getting caught? They'll never know. But then there are things in life that don't have an easy fix, that don't have a simple solution, that don't have a how-to video. Things like what to do when you have problems with family, or when it seems like you have no control in your life, or what to do when someone has done something to you. I mean, clearly, they gotta go. The truth is, there's a lot of life that doesn't have a solution you can just find online. So how do you know what to do when you don't know what to do?
How many of you would consider yourself or know someone who overuses emojis when they text? Like, there's more emojis than words in their text sometimes. I'd imagine that we all have a friend who somehow feels like there's no text that's complete without 16 different emojis in it. Or maybe they send tons of those GIFs. Is it GIF or GIF? Does anyone really know how to answer that question? Anyway, maybe you know someone who sends those all the time. But when it comes to texting, I get it. Too much is too much. And at the same time, I've got to be honest. Emojis and GIFs or GIFs have helped me out a bunch of times. Like this one. I use this one a lot. So I usually send this one either whenever I find something that is very funny or whenever I did something maybe that's embarrassing. Sometimes I just send it when I don't have the words. Here's another one. Now, maybe I'm overly sensitive to smells, but I feel like I'm texting this a lot. Just changed a blowout diaper. Someone's shoes stanky. I mean, some smells are just too gross for words. So you have the green face. And then there's this one. Now, whether I'm sad about something that's for real heavy, or I just discovered I'm just bummed because the gas station is no longer selling those yummy meat pies. I'm just kidding. I don't eat those nasty things. That would be the green face emoji again. But maybe if the weather totally cancels the fun plans I had, I use that one. And that's really the beauty of emojis. They help us talk about how we feel without having to use words. Kind of cool. Now, there are a few emojis that I don't use very often, but when I do, they say a lot. And these set the stage for what we're about to talk about today. It's these emojis. Now, I know we've all had those situations where we're like, I have no words for this. Like, we're shocked. I like the first one the best, the face without a mouth, because it represents those moments when you simply don't have words to say. It's when we hear about something or something happens that we can't make sense of. And I'd venture to say that most of the time, these shock emojis are sent along with a text that reports something happening that was shocking in a bad way. Something that catches us off guard and maybe hits us out of nowhere. And that, my friends, is what we're talking about today. So here's a question. Have you ever experienced anything in your life like that? Something that simply rocked your world. Maybe it caught you off guard or made you feel uncertain or maybe caused you a lot of hurt. And maybe you felt this way when you got the news that your parents were splitting up, even though you had no idea things were that bad. Or it wasn't bad news, but your stepmom is pregnant and you weren't exactly expecting another sibling. Maybe a friend had something mean to say about you, and he or she accidentally sent that text to you, and you immediately knew it was meant to go to someone else. Maybe you felt this way when your mom or dad told your family you were going to have to move because of a job change. Or maybe you felt this way when you experienced an injury right before the beginning of your season. Maybe you got dumped, or maybe you went to break up with someone and they said they were relieved, and you're like, wait, what? Unfortunately, this list could go on for a long time, with examples of times when your world got rocked by some kind of shocking news or circumstance. If you haven't experienced it yet, there will be a time in your life when something like this happens. The thing about these painful moments is that they often hit us out of nowhere, and it's difficult for us to know just how they'll make us feel at that time. And because of that, it's difficult for us to also know how we're going to respond to those. Now, sometimes we surprise ourselves by how well we think we'll handle it. We think, wow, I figured news like this would send me off the edge, but I'm actually doing all right. And on the other hand, sometimes we surprise ourselves by how much it tears us apart. We think, I don't even know why I'm so upset about this, but I'm a mess. And then sometimes we feel closer to God when stuff rocks us. But other times we wonder where God is at all. And because we're all wired differently, we experience hurt differently. But that doesn't change the fact that hurt hurts. And when life hurts, we all find ourselves wondering what to do next. And that's why we're doing this series, What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. Because we all encounter those no words emoji moments. So did Joseph in the Bible. So we began this series by talking about him last week. And this week, his story continues in a way that can only be described as... Last week, we established that Joseph is one of the most famous people in the Old Testament of the Bible. He had some family drama that he definitely played a part in creating. He was his dad's favorite child and therefore given special treatment compared to his brothers. And on top of that, he had some dreams that his brothers and even his parents bowed down to him out of respect and honor. And because Joseph seemed to have a hard time picking up on social cues, he shared these dreams with his family. And we talked about how that didn't go over well at all. His brothers were not okay with him being dad's favorite. And his brothers were not okay with him sharing his dreams of ruling over them one day. So how did they respond? Well, let's go back to Genesis. Genesis 37:18 says, "But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him." Now that just went from 0 to 100 really quick, didn't it? Well, it continues. "Here comes the dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." Now, before we continue, please don't ever let things get this bad with your siblings. Keep them and the ferocious animals at a distance if at all possible. But listen to this. Despite his anger towards Joseph, one of his brothers actually had a conscience in the moment. It says, when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. Thank goodness for old Rube. He convinced his brothers to throw Joseph into a well instead of going homicidal on him. He even planned on coming back to rescue Joseph later. And you know what? The brothers listened to Reuben. And when Joseph approached, they ripped off that special coat his father had given him, and then they threw him in a well. Now, if Joseph would have had a phone at this time, this is when he would have texted his best friend. But they're still not done with him. They notice a caravan of traders approaching. And Judah, another one of Joseph's brothers, suggests that they sell Joseph to these traders. After all, selling Joseph to a group of people who would most likely make him a slave is much better than murdering him, right? So that's exactly what they did. And they dipped Joseph's coat in the blood of a wild animal, take it to their father, and tell him that Joseph was likely attacked and killed by an animal. What a cover story. In Genesis 37:32, it says, "They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, 'We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe.'" Now that last line tells us everything we need to know about this situation. The brothers obviously knew that the coat belonged to Joseph. They brought it up to let their dad know that they noticed the way he favored Joseph. They were mad about it. They didn't call Joseph's robe our brother's robe. They said, "your son's robe." Sounds like a bunch of jealous jerks to me. And so this might have been what Joseph's second text looked like. "Good news, I'm out of the well. Bad news, they sold me. Like actually sold me for money." Now, I'm being a bit lighthearted here, but there was nothing lighthearted about this situation. We really can't imagine the fear, the despair, uncertainty, and anger and hurt that Joseph felt. Betrayed by his own flesh and blood, sold into very real slavery by the brothers he grew up with. The message being sent to him was loud and clear. We're all better off without you. I mean, what would you even do in this situation? How would you get yourself unsold? This was clearly a what to do when you don't know what to do moment. Now, our stories are different than Joseph's, but we will all experience some kind of pain. We all have scary or painful or maybe dangerous moments that catch us off guard. And we'll all have moments when life doesn't make sense and we don't have the words to process what all is happening. And unfortunately for Joseph, he had more shocking moments in his future. And we'll look at some of those in the next few weeks. But I want to highlight 5 powerful words that show up in the historical account of his life. Now, while they didn't keep him from getting thrown into a pit and they didn't keep him from getting sold, These 5 words literally made all the difference and helped Joseph maybe more than anything else. Here are those 5 words. The Lord was with Joseph. That's Genesis 39:2. Now, Joseph didn't really have a lot going for him in the pit, and even less afterward. But when Joseph was in despair and wondering how life would turn out, he could rely on that single truth that God was with him. And that truth didn't change the reality of Joseph's situation, but it was better than being alone. And that truth didn't mean that Joseph could see where the story was going, but he could know that he wasn't entirely dependent on himself to get out of that situation. And that truth didn't mean that Joseph could easily deal with the things that happened to him. It didn't mean that he had a reason or explanation for the pain in his life, but he didn't have to figure out things all by himself. And the same is true for you and I. When there's nothing you can do, God is with you. So when life hands you shocking news and you don't know what to do, God's with you. Truthfully, we hear that all the time. So often, those words lose their meaning. We don't feel them. But think about it for a second. God is with you, not in some abstract way, but He is literally present, near you, next to you when you feel alone. And when you and I can truly understand and embrace this truth, it changes things for us. Our circumstances may not change. After all, Joseph wasn't immediately returned to his family, but it changes our perspective on our situation. And maybe more than anything else, it gives us hope that we can keep going even when it feels like we can't. Knowing that God's with us may not change our circumstances, but it might just change us. It might just give us enough hope to keep going, even in the midst of our hopeless circumstances. Now, I know it's easy to give in to the hurt we've experienced. It's easy to let fear overwhelm us or to let anger consume us. We've got a lot of reasons to let difficult and sometimes unfair situations get the last word. But when we know that God is with us, the uncertainty of life doesn't get the last word. God does. So, here's that question that we often ask. What does it look like for us? There are no formulas or easy answers for getting through hard times, but here are some things to do in the meantime. The first thing is be real. Feel your feelings. Not everyone will experience incredible luck in life, but one thing's for sure, everyone will go through tough times and pain. All throughout the Bible, people went through difficulties, and there are many accounts of them being real and honest with God about their struggles. There are no cliches to make the hard times go away, and our job isn't just to suck it up and act like everything's okay. If we believe that God is with us, then we should know that God is more than okay with our honest questions, with our doubts, and with our fears. The second thing is to remind yourself and each other that God is with you. Now here's a spoiler alert. Things did eventually work out for Joseph. But we know that because we can read the whole story in the Bible. But when Joseph was in it, he didn't know how it would turn out. There were no spoiler alerts for him. All he could do is face another day wondering how things would turn out. And so he held on to one thing, that God was with him. In moments when life is toughest, that's when this reminder is most important. God is with you, and your story isn't over yet. The Bible is full of these stories of God's faithfulness to those who trust in Him. That's why we're looking at Joseph's life in these series. And our life will be full of moments when we don't know what to do about our pain. In those moments, nobody wants to be alone. And it's important to know that when you don't know what to do, God is with you, and so are we. You aren't alone. And that should give you hope when things feel hopeless. Now, it won't make the difficult circumstances go away, but you'll have something to count on, and that is to know that you're never alone.